So welcome to this evening's talk, Dance Matters. Really delighted to have both Sean Abreu and Reese Dennis here with us in the lovely site that is the MK Gallery. So I just wanted to say thank you to the gallery as well for hosting this talk. I thought it'd be nice for us each to go around and introduce ourselves and say a little bit about what we do, our names, and the context of this talk and what brings you here. Can we start with Sean?
Hi everyone. For those who haven't met me, I'm Sean Abreu. I'm from Brazil originally, and I am British by choice, and I make work as a choreographer from the UK, locally, nationally, and internationally. I have been coming here to Milton Keynes for the past year and a half by invitation of Helen, who introduced me to MK Gallery, where we are today. And I have performed here in September last year, 2021. It's supposed to be happening 2020, which got postponed, so we had the whole break in between. So yeah, that's my connection to this place. I'd like to thank the Arts Council as well for helping us to make this happen today. That's me.
Right. And then to Reese.
Hey, I'm Reese Dennis. I am one of the artistic directors of a dance organisation called Fubu Nation, which is a London-based dance organisation focused on creating visibility for Black people, mainly in contemporary dance. The organisation started in 2019, and I've kind of been working as an individual artist, doing work with other artists, and trying to facilitate the space of this organisation growing into many different things. But it's meant that I've had a multidisciplinary practice, and I've been able to engage in many different art forms, so there's constantly always a conversation kind of going back and forth, which I'm learning from. And I guess my connection here is through Jean, who I've worked with, in a small capacity so far. And I guess there's like a growing interest. He's Brazilian, as he said, identifies as like a British kind of identity as well, and I think I'm also trying to develop myself as an international artist, and being here and connecting with Sean is a part of that, and yes, I'm kind of open to see what the conversation brings.
Great, wonderful. My name is Helen Parler. I'm the Artistic Director for MOTUS. I'm really delighted to have been working with Sean over the past sort of year, now to meet Reese as well. And the whole sort of ideology behind MOTUS is to give a platform for dance in the area, and all kinds of dance, and in all kinds of spaces as well. So we've been doing a mixture of work since our inception in 2014, and looking at various genres, various sites for dance to take place in, and really trying to encourage, I guess, the ways people see dance or what they think that dance can include. And we're delighted to be hosting these or co-hosting these events, which are encouraging discussions around dance. It kind of ties in with our adjustments program quite nicely, where we look at new work and we look about how we talk about dance generally, and open up the topics about movement and interpretation. And so this is also a really lovely arm to our work, sort of open up the discussions. So why dance matters? So Sean, you came to myself in the gallery to want to talk about this topic of dance matters. Why that kind of title? Why did that come to the forefront of your mind, and why is it relevant now?
There's so many angles to this. I think, as the title is already suggesting, I feel very relevant in many ways to the discussion and what it is, and not as a sort of a labouring idea to sort of try to convince people, just a fact that it is, the matters, and also the matters of dance. What actually is the ins and outs of making work, what does it entail? It came originally to me out of this whole pandemic time where we had so much time in our hands that we could actually start talking to each other, and actually being able to speak and freely kind of articulate all the things that we were doing and what we were living at that particular moment in time. I think everyone, not only dance artists, but actually the whole world in time, had time to stop and be able to communicate. So I'm not prepared to let go yet of that time, in a sense. I feel like I'm slightly slower in the sense of coming out of this space. I don't feel like I don't want to just forget that it doesn't exist and business as usual. So Dance Matter came out of the necessity of maintaining that space, maintaining a sort of a check-in point, a nurturing space, an entry point for other people. Because I think also there was a lot of audiences that we didn't know existed that was able to just, kind of drop in a Zoom meeting somewhere. And always people would be more kind of willing to take space or take time to look at something they didn't look before. So I think Dance Matters is coming from this perspective of a need, mine or perhaps of everyone else that is in England and in the UK. Hopefully we're going to be doing more versions of this in the future, but I feel there is a need for having some kind of space to congregate, to come together, not like with no sides, not like major, everyone knows everything. Hopefully this is a space that is as non-hierarchical as possible. So that's the other thing that I kind of felt we don't have yet. It's like a space where anyone can come and sit down and listen, and we can articulate to each other and share experiences. I think that's what Dance Matters, in its principle, for me, came about. And the proposition came from that.
And I guess the whole lockdown as well, people were away from other people. There was a sort of lack of kind of bonding, both through conversations and physical bonding. And, you had I just want to hug somebody, I just want that. People were talking about physicalization quite a lot, I just want to be with people. And also I think the arts really gave an amazing platform for people during lockdown. So people, the whole evaluation about how we present our work kind of changed. And in a way it's good that will never go back to how it kind of was, that there are all these different ways in. And did you feel that as well, Grace? Like, how did you sort of kind of go into your practice, or sort of? I think everybody had a few weeks of holiday going. This is actually quite nice, and then it's actually, well, now how do we move forward? And we're missing what we're doing.
Yeah, it was. The lockdown was an interesting period because we had that moment of pause, but then there was also the whole BLM movement that happened. So it was a time where everyone was kind of reflecting, and then also we had people from organisations kind of coming out about their experiences, and I feel like there was a build-up of what everyone's feeling as people, as individuals within their working environments, and throughout that time, in the lockdown, people had the opportunity to really digest and just vocalise what they were feeling. I think we're very stuck on doing, especially as dancers and movers, it's always very physical, so our kind of human side sometimes gets put to the side, and that was the moment where I felt like I was hearing a lot of things and people were finally getting to process what they were feeling, and starting to realise that they can engage with that feeling a little bit more and express that a bit more present rather than allowing it to build up over time. So I found that really interesting and inspiring to be in this constant state of reflection, and I feel like I kind of kept that from that period throughout the lockdown. But in terms of work, I think it really started for me the organisation that I started with my friend Eduardo, was really small, and like we weren't really that well known. And I guess because we engaged with the medium of film quite a lot, and we started to have this multidisciplinary approach. When the lockdown came, people were looking for a lot of online platformings of shows and these kind of things. So I feel like from that point on, it started with reflection, but from that point on, it really took off because there was so much platforms online to share our work. So yeah, I do feel like it was reflective, but for a very short period of time, and then it kind of just carried on going. But I always carry that feeling of reflection in everything that I do now, which is why I think platforms like this are really important, because we often figure ourselves in process and put the kind of product first sometimes, before we can really get involved in it. So I think this is just to go back to what you was talking about before, I think creating that safe space to express whatever you're feeling or going through, or wherever you are in your process is quite important. Someone like me, as a growing artist.
And I think, just going back to, what we were saying about people's time, that they suddenly had time on their hands, and so they had time to try new things, and to, that they might not have thought was for them, and because it's online, it's easily accessed, to go, do you know what, I'm just going to give this a go, and found actually some alignment with it. And I guess then the question is, how do we take that forward? Because I think everybody's sort of noticed that, or got, online, they've got all these people, or this many people sort of sharing work, or engaged very differently. So, do you feel that period is now affecting how you process your work now, or who you engage with, or those audiences you want to keep from that time, and how do you keep them?
I mean, as I was saying, I'm very highly aware of that reflective space, and as an artist, I'm very much connected. I cannot start a process without having that huge amount of time where I can look back at what I've done before, because I believe in continuous transformation as part of my practice. So I've always maintained that space where I can really fully realize that, let go until I can move to the next level. And I think, again, going back to Dance Matters, for me, it became more about this idea of slowing down, this idea of counter to efficiency, because we are driven at the moment a lot about all the time this kind of glorification of efficiency. We always have to be delivering something, or always have to be doing something. There's always to be showing that we kind of have made something. And the whole place behind of the something that you achieved is totally forgotten. It's kind of not made as important. And I think it is, as artists, as makers, or even if you're doing anything, there's all that space before you kind of actually make things happen. So I guess for me, it's definitely reinforcing, in fact. I'm dragging my heels, I'm not going to start making work tomorrow, or I want to think about it. And again, by proposition of Abreu Dance as a company, I feel that need of being connected to my peers, as well as to organizations, as well as the audience. I want to know what people are feeling. It's very important to me as an artist to take in consideration. Not that I will pander to that, I always make what I feel is best, but I think I need this place where I can freely able to connect to people. And then it gave a little bit of that space. That's what people think. They're commenting on this, or they notice this other bit. So we had that. How can we continue on that? I think that's why I like to think that this space maybe provide, or at least for me as an artist, just coming recently, chatting already, it's been great. Planning, chatting to everyone here now, make this happen. We still don't really know what's happening, but I like to think something's happening.
Do you think it gave the opportunity for the audience at home to like understand a bit more about actually what dance involves, the processes? Because quite often dance is delivered as a product, isn't it? Even though there may have been like a huge process behind that. For, like you were talking about earlier, you know, it'd be years until you actually create something. But actually what the audience sees at that point is that creation.
Yeah.
And might not understand, whereas when you're meeting them in a different space, do you think that relationship started to change in a good way? You know, how do you kind of keep that relationship going? Is it a richer experience?
I think that's a really interesting point. Especially with now there's, well, throughout the pandemic, people are expressing themselves so much through social media. So I'm wondering, through your question for myself as well, if people felt like they were a bit more closer to movement artists or artists in general because they were sharing more of their work on like a one-to-one basis or like through like an online social media presence where they're a bit more accessible. Whereas when you go to see a show, you kind of see the spectacle, you read the program, and then you leave, so you don't really get. And you might get to talk to an artist or two after the show, but you don't really get that chance to, I don't know, just engage with them on a level outside of this piece that they're performing in the whole show. So I think that's as you're saying that, I'm also asking myself that question as well, and asking myself, who is connecting to these people? Like, is it the dance? Is it dancers that are connecting with dancers, or is it? Because I think for me, I'm always curious to see how we can bring more people that aren't interested in dance to get to know about it more, and what are the ways that we can do that, which I think can happen through different mediums. So yeah, when you ask that question, it just strikes all these kind of thoughts in my head about who is the audience and how are they engaging, what are the new audience, what are the new ways that we can bring new audiences in, and maybe that was the start of it.
There's kind of a thing, I don't know, we do, through MOTUS we do a lot of work in kind of public spaces that are free. So, our audiences are really eclectic, really wide, almost can't predict them. But what we do find is that people stay for hours because, well, maybe because it's free and they can grab a coffee. But the feedback that we get is, they enjoy the variety of work and they surprise themselves because they've enjoyed it. But it's dance and they don't go and see dance. So why, we're in, where are we, 2022?
Yeah.
Why is that still a bit of a stigma around dance, and how can we make the fact that, dance can matter to you, dance can matter to you, dance is relevant to you, you can see yourself in this, you are invited, all those different things, so it's not, is it still quite a scary thing to go and to watch? So how, has this period sort of helped that, or how can we continue that, or is it important to you as artists? Sorry, lots of questions.
Yeah. You can try. Well, thank you, Helen, for doing this. When I first thought of coming up with this idea, I thank you so much for believing and kind of in hosting it, which I think I couldn't think of anybody else better, because I think this is about poking us a little bit. I mean, and of course the work that MOTUS does, which I've experienced in the MK rows, and I was surprised at the amount of people that actually turned up, because there was always people passing through, and always people dancing on all these spaces around, and I was kind of quite surprised, in a pleasant way, to know that there's so much activities happening, and I still can't find what is the linking point of that necessity, because I think people have a necessity to express themselves physically. Going back to dance matters to me. It's like we all have a body. I think I speak for myself. as a movement artist, I create work from the perspective of the body because I think it's the most genuine and honest way of expressing how I feel. And I think that it's because in language, when I'm articulating it, I'm coming up with all these different blockages. Am I saying the right thing? I'm not saying. If I'm moving, I don't need to think of these things. If I truly feel like I want to move, I don't need to feel these. All these things can go to the back of my head. And essentially when I'm creating, that's what I'm trying to convey. I get really sort of this question in my mind, how so much activity around it should translate naturally into people not curious to come and see it because it's something so I'm using a word that I'm trying to change, is so natural to us individually because we all can connect with the kind of immediacy of the body. It's like if I'm tired, I want to lie down. If something hurts, I feel something in my body that it tells me something else. There's kind of, I am curious also how that is not openly, broken down to people to say, hey, artists, dance artists or dance is something as close that it can get as an art form to you. You don't have to think about it. And I always keep thinking that dance for me, when I say to people, oh, but I don't understand, and I often say, you don't need to understand, you need to feel it. For me, a dance that matters to me is a dance that I feel. It's not a dance that I need to kind of go and read an essay and then understand the dance. Not disrespect, but it's just like, for me, dance can act on people in a way that it's something they are mostly interested in the feeling, the sentiment, the emotion that is translating into. So as soon as you start kind of, oh, I need to understand. I think language is like, I have nothing against like not being understood. It's like I think misunderstanding, mistakes, all welcome. Find language is something that is just a tool rather than the meaning behind it is always what is more important. I don't like to dwell too much. I hope that was answering some of the questions of the demystification of dance for me. I think, I don't know about you, Chris, but that's where I'm coming from, is when I'm making work, people to feel what I'm doing rather than understand what I'm doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, when we think about like accessibility in dance, like when an audience member is watching a particular dance piece, sometimes they might not feel connected, they might just see a body moving in space because the physicality of the work might not ask that. Every work has like is emotionally driven or like asks the dance group subject to feel something. Some things are just purely physical, and I think there's sort of misunderstanding with some of the audiences to what they feel dance is. When they come and watch maybe like a ballet piece or something, they won't feel as connected as if they came to watch something that maybe was a bit more human physically and replicates movements that they've seen that they do with a person. And obviously it's taste and it's preference as well with these things. But I think the majority of audiences that watch dance watch work that isn't always reflecting them as a person. So there's this thing of dance being like in a bubble, or it looks like this, and really everyone should be kind of feeling it. And I think for me, I really like what you were saying about, well, just everything you was just saying actually. But I think for me, the essence of dance has always come from the sense of community. So even though I studied in contemporary dance and I got training in all of these things, the essence of it really starts from, it goes from my family first in like a communal aspect, and then it's like my area, so where I grew up and where I started dancing in this community center, and then it spirals up to like training a hip hop dance group, and then it goes up to training in conservatoire, and now it's like inside the world. And but it always comes back to that like root of community for me. So when I'm in different spaces and I'm seeing different works, I can really feel when it, that's alive, that feeling, and when it's not, and it's so nice when it is, because I feel like I feel it less in dance spaces, even though there's so much work and there's a lot of things going on. I don't have that feeling all the time, which is also why I don't usually watch a lot of dance works, because I want to feel something more than like just sitting kind of observe. So he was just saying, just kind of struck that up in me, but yeah, I completely agree.
It's interesting, sorry, I'm gonna, you just diverted me there, because you said, I don't go and see a lot of dance works. That's interesting.
That's really interesting. It's true. It's true.
You know,
Why do you not see that?
I understand it, but maybe you can talk a little bit more like why, if you can sort of define that.
Yes, I don't know. I think there's not. I guess there's not a reason behind it. I've seen a lot of works, but I'm not a theatre goer. I don't, wait for a show to come out and then go and see it. I kind of end up seeing things by chance, or like if it's like a company that comes to London maybe once in a blue moon, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to see this company, so I'm probably not going to get to see them again. But I think it goes back to this thing of like feeling connected, and sometimes when I watch dance works, I feel like I'm just watching like a spectacle, which looks really beautiful and is amazing, but doesn't necessarily connect with me. And I think it's also personality as well. Like people dance for different reasons, and one of my reasons for dancing isn't associated with like virtuosity or like performance, even though it's like a byproduct of what I love to do. So I think there's not a first for me to see work and like become sort of person or associated with that. It's more about always kind of feeling connected to movement in general, and I feel like even though I love to move, I shouldn't have to like kind of tick these boxes of things that I need to do as a dance artist. I could just kind of exist in who I am, and and if I see a show, then I might see it.
That's very interesting. I mean, I'm kind of fascinated with this answer, because I'm like, oh my god.
It opens a box of words.
Why? Because it's like also we probably all have these sort of preconceived ideas of why should we or should we not engage. But I wonder if it is something to do also how we communicate what dance is as well.
Yeah.
I'm having a big thing about language at the moment, of continuously questioning I'm going through a period which I call like post-structuralism, like which I find language builds you to just think like I must say things in this way. It's about how I know and from how I learn of what I know to explain what I know. So it's not necessarily really. That's why I go back to dance all the time, because it's like it's something that is totally natural to me, that I don't have to have all these different boxes that I need to tick in my brain. But I think it's something to do with how do we speak to the audience about it, I guess. How it is communicated in a way that it feels something that it's more closer, and feel more kind of connected to, I guess. There's something about communication, of the way we discuss it, and this openness, genuine dialogue as towards the perception of what dance really it's about. And I have even these questions, so I'm talking a lot, so I just have all these things in my brain, and that's why it does matter. Because I just get it all out there, because it's like also what is dance, even in educational level. You're talking about dance for you in your home, in your environment. Why this dance matters less than the one that I did in my university? Why do I feel that the belly dancing ladies that I saw every day in MK Rose, why their dance matters less than what I'm doing? Where does it lie, that kind of why does it have to have a distance and categorization in a way that it actually stops people to enter more, to experience more. That's my question.
It's kind of this thing where movement is just valid, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're exploring, we should be encouraged to explore. There shouldn't be those barriers. It just should be a positive thing to explore our bodies, right from when you're in school and there's this encouragement to be confident about your bodies. You know, because I think as we grow up, we strip that kind of right down, you know, into, I've written tempo of life. So we're on a tempo, we've got an aim, we've got a target. But within that, that's very linear and very, you know, we've forgotten about all the stuff that goes on in between, which is the movement within life that no one can predict. You know, so, you know, when we strip that down, even in schools and education, how do we create more fuller, more artistic, more impulsive, creative, wider thinking young people? Why is it important, you know, for those young people to experience that in their schooling?
Don't talk to me about
curriculum,
because it's like, just scrap everything. That's what I say. Because you talk something very important there for me at the moment. I've been listening to some philosophy. I discovered really into philosophy as well. So through the pandemic, going back to that sort of time. So philosophy is becoming something quite already part of the vocabulary that I utilize in a lot of my work. I'm all constantly questioning. I come from that space, and I think that's what people don't understand. Sometimes when I say, "Oh, I'm making a work about prisons," and people are like, "How are you going to translate this into that?" And I'm like, I'm talking about the sentiment of it a lot of the time, because I often question bigger things like, what is freedom? Like, how do I feel that I'm free? Is it free when I'm free? So then I thought, okay, talking about prison might be a good idea to start to sort of unravel all these questions of freedom. What is freedom? So linearity, I think, it teaches us to just follow something like in a line. I think that is time for me. It's the linearity of time. I think people should just ignore it completely because it's like if you start seeing time on like a fragmented part of the person, I think it would be easier for you to then, you know, kind of feel less constrained, I guess. So I think it all goes back to time, that experience. I hope I didn't divert the conversation too much, but I think because I think our experience of dance in that format is always it's to do with like how we are consuming other information throughout our lives. I think. I don't know.
I always find dancers quite present. You know, when they're either having conversations with people or they're in a space, they're very present, which is quite a big life skill. You know, what is it about that kind of? Why does it make you present?
I think it's constant engagement with like self as well. That we're always feeling our like bodies are always kind of in tune with ourselves on a level. I guess we always like engage with ourselves and our bodies, and we have maybe a deeper relationship to our bodies than the normal person. Because I also get that feedback as well. Like we're very present to people from people that are like not dancers. I hear that quite a lot. But for me, it feels just like that, just being normal. But I can also feel, and I think this also comes from this kind of improvisation practice and like sensorial kind of practice with things like further kinds of like somatic-based practices that I've learned in training that have contributed to how I am in life, in terms of like how I sense my body, but also how I'm sensing the room and like the levels of energy in the room, how people are engaging with whatever's going on, whether it's in the studio or in like a normal live context. I feel like there's skills I've learned through dance that have allowed me to thrive in how I engage with life as a whole. outside of like the studio context, you know.
Yeah, I think that experience of the body present at that moment, totally connected. We just utilize the word that I feel like one of the people who don't know anything about dance understand somatic practice. I think that word is like, but I think it's, yeah.
I get scared by that word.
Yeah, I do.
And I'm a dancer, you know. Having experience in somatic practice, I kind of go,
Oh God, what do you mean?
Obviously when I do
It's so simple if you think about it.
Well, yeah.
Again, it goes back to language. That's what I'm so excited. Once we start creating these huge words, and I'm going away. Even I go like this, like somatic practice. It's very simple. It's just like it's actually articulating what you're feeling, right? How you're sensing things, and you kind of embody. It's about embodying everything that you're sensing.
And having like a hyper level of sensitivity to yourself in the space.
By somatic. Which is in itself is a way of fully experiencing anything. It's about experience like I'm here.
Being connected to yourself.
Yeah.
Which sometimes, you know, because again, going back to the tempo of life, we're always, I've certainly had experiences of this, and you know, maybe other people do as well, where you feel out of your body because you're always trying to chase something because of the tempo, and actually it takes more time, you know, so sometimes reverting back to somatic practice, I guess, you know.
And it's about that, again, going back to the idea of, you know, of slowing down. And really giving yourself, and dance needs constantly that. I feel
because it's always moving.
Yeah, it's like you constantly need to know that, otherwise we even, as practitioners, we don't know what we're doing, because it's just like so much here, and I think again, like going forward, for me this is becoming more and more important, slowing down. Like this moment here, like it's about all that. It's like, hang on a second. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing here? What can we do? And look at it, just feel it. Then I feel I can embody my practice better. And that's what, for me, and I hope for other people as well, like find that sense of giving each other that space, just simply just slow down, just be in a room. Don't know what's going to happen, but that's fine. Things are always going to be moving.
Yeah.
Things are always in motion.
Yeah.
Nothing ever stops, in my mind, as a practitioner.
It's interesting, very interesting. And I think that kind of leads me on to my next question, just about kind of, you know, dance training. You know, you go through dance training for 3, 5, 7, 8 more years. And it is a rigorous physical process where you train your body to do technical feats, and you understand technically how your body works, almost like, you know, a machine in a way. And then there's this other level of being a dancer where it's being an artist. And then it's how that combines and why that's important. Because I think sometimes, like, dance, you know, even though it's traditionally quite an expensive art form, it's the poorer of the art forms sometimes, because we're expected to deliver the physicality, but what's the art that's going in, and that takes time. So, you know, it's just, again, is this shifting now though? Is this shifting through time? You know, traditionally it was quite something that dance was something you'd look at, you would be mesmerised by, you'd be taken to a different world. Is it shifting? Is there space for all of that? What's your sort of observations? Sorry, and a massive question too.
I would say,
how long do we have?
so the first part that you mentioned about training and being an artist, I feel like the parts of my training that I've taken is the ability to reflect and articulate what's actually happening, because I think pre-training I was doing things without knowing what I was doing or understanding how I'm doing those things, and I think it just gave me that kind of switch to understand it for myself, even though I'm not doing these techniques that I studied, but the conversations and the ability to articulate that, I think to other people that don't understand dance as much or learning really helped me and is still helping me, if that makes sense. And like right now, for instance, with our practice, our movement practice at Fubu Nation, me and the co-director Wada are from the same kind of movement backgrounds of kind of this community space going into this like conservatoire, like, contemporary kind of dance training, and so we do things very naturally because we're very informed by our bodies, and sometimes it's hard to articulate to someone trying to learn it because it often looks like a combination of contemporary and hip hop. And I think without training, we wouldn't be able to find the language. He was speaking about language, the language to explain what it is, and maybe the practice wouldn't be able to expand if we weren't able to kind of create a dialogue around it or codify it. And to the second question, I was taking very large. Okay, I mean,
over to you, John.
I'm just thinking, I'm a positivist, so I like to say yes, the perception is shifting. I classify myself as a dance artist, and as expected of me, I'm always questioning everything. So when I question my background in Brazilian popular dances, then I went to college training. When I got to college training, I learned all these other things, and I'm like, almost the college training went like, forget about this is not dance. And then I came out, I was like, start making all these beautiful organized movement. And then I went at some point in my career, I was like, well, why do I have to do this? And I questioned again. I just started moving to a space that I really feel inhabiting the artist aspect of being a movement maker. Because so far I've been taught to be a movement creator. And in fact, I think the perception of how people, I like to think that perception of dance sometimes is mistaken. Because there's a degree of expectation of spectacle. And the art element of it for me is forgotten completely. And my choice of starting to work in galleries is particularly prescient at the moment, because I see my work as an art form, and the art element is super serious. I'm not trying to be like highbrow about it, because I think, again, it always involves about feeling, it involves about communication, urgency, talking, it's body. I'm always going to be delivering the spectacle. Don't worry about that. It's just the element of it that I want to be interpreted in art. For me, is super important. And the theatre language does not deliver. There's a discrepancy between that sort of sense of is this an art form to be interacting with? Or is this just like, I go and see, I need to understand this thing. So then I'm kind of inhabiting a language of theatricality that does neither belong or translate what dance for me is about. It can be all these things. It has space for all these things, but dance artists, for me, I no longer should be bound to communicating in one way. And the lockdown has forced me to communicate in lots of different ways. That's again why I'm not ready to let go. It's like, we need to talk about this, right? So it's like, I've started to make films, I started making music, I started making drawings. I express myself through drawings now, I express myself through writing poetry. I didn't know I could write poetry, like, no. Do I think I'm any of these things? No. I'm still creating as an artist, movement maker. Everything I think about it's imagined in movement. But I could write it about it. We do when we ask for grants for application. Like, write to and say like, by the way, I have this amazing show. It's like I have to articulate, so it has to be translated somehow. I think, I hope it's becoming broader how we speak of it. I want to be more and more again proposing these things is about saying. I think language is also visual language, gallery, movement, all these things that should feel more like kind of a fluid when it comes to artistic expression. They all can easily, I don't think categorization does us any good sometimes. It stops us because, I like going to the galleries, but maybe I shouldn't go to the theatre because I like going to the theatre. So why not? They're in the same world. I like film, but I can't see gallery. So I like films. It's speaking creatively, always. I don't think so. I think that gets misconstrued because somehow we expect people that they should know how to do tandies and like do jumps and like, no. You can engage intellectually. Yeah. Very much so.
Because it means you work a lot in collaboration, don't you? And it's all those, learning about all those different processes and how does that then, why do you work in collaboration? What does it give you? And how does that affect the work ultimately or how it's perceived?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reason why we like to work in collaboration is because dance is such a, we was talking about earlier, but it's like a niche within a niche. So it doesn't feel like it grabs like hold of everyone outside of its own industry. So in working with like other media like photography or film, you pull in people that are interested in that art form and it gives them access to dance through the medium that they're interested in. Whereas sometimes I feel like we can be limited by just keeping dance work in like the theatre context. So the last work that we created was basically we called it a series, and it was the same work, but it was communicated through photography, film, and performance. And it's, I guess it's really about someone that's maybe not interested in theatre taking away the same thing from the work just by seeing a few images or maybe a film. Does it always have to be like an hour-long performance that we have to sit through? Yeah. Can we still gain the same feelings and access the same work without having to sit and watch a whole show? So I think it just makes it a bit more accessible for everyone to enjoy. And
we're seeing in things like literature quite a lot about, relevance. It's important to see yourself in things, important to see yourself in a story, or especially for young people, to be able to identify or have ambition, or, why is that really relevant now in dance? How can that translate in dance? So it's not, traditionally it was very ethereal, and now what can we do to keep that going better, from an early age onwards?
Do you have the answer to that?
I think we do it naturally anyway. We do it that, but then how do we keep that relationship going?
You mean through through growth? Could you just repeat the question?
So I think it's about people identifying themselves that this is a place for them. Or when they read the story, this story means nothing to me because I don't see myself in it. Yeah. So how can dance keep...
About reflection. It's like how can people see themselves reflecting in however is the work of dance it's about. How dance can be relevant in that format.
Right.
Yeah. How can people connect with what we do more from seeing something from them within it?
But do they have to see themselves in it?
Not necessarily. It's a question, Sometimes you watch something and you go, I'm really moved by that because I really identified with it. It moved me because of this. You know, I can see when there's someone like me in it.
Yeah, and I don't think it always has to be like a visual representation, because some like work has universal themes that people feel connected to. Like, I think a lot of the work that I make is centered around like black experiences, but we try to make it in a way that it reflects all experiences, because this is specific to my experience, but the feeling and emotion and the reasons are something that any human would feel, whether you're, no matter what colour you are. So I don't think it's necessarily about like the form, but it's more about is the feeling identifiable between what the work is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a really big question, Helen, simply because I'm battling with that at the moment. Battling what I say is like not like labouring through, because I'm going through a period of understanding difference without separation, if that makes any sense. I'm not interested anymore in that discussion, because we already know like we are different, right? But I'm most of the time looking at what it's enticing or trying to understand what actually we're not different about, because there's no separation. And again, for me, it's highlighting the fact that movement and dance is about bodies, and it's about human, it's about breathing, it's a very real thing. That is the universal language that we inherently have from the moment we're born. It's like you take your first breath. There's nothing more that you can see yourself in it. If I see a body breathing on space, I mean, if I can't identify with it, then it's probably not the body that is there, it's the view that is not looking to see it. So for me, it's quite. It comes from a very simplistic. It comes from deconstructing a very minute and micro to then the macro, you know. Because for me, it's like if people understand to that level, there, you know, it's like there's a beating heart on that space right there. There is your identification for me, you know. And dance should be described always as this sort of embodiment of you know, life as it is, you know. So for me, the way I try to do is always to think. For me, it's always about contemporaneity. For me, it's always about now. It's always here. I'm trying to capture that in my work and how I'm thinking, and as a reflection of what is going on. So it's like always. So for me, dance has like a capability and a capacity, and should not be forced to be anything else. It can have all the others expression, but ultimately dance is about that. We practice. That's why community, I think, is so important element, that we don't find that distance between those two places, because it's there. Dance is made in that space. When we go to clubbing, dancing our hearts out, that is the dance, that the same one that I represent. Because I have the word artist doesn't give me any right to feel that I'm any better than that person dancing in the middle of the... So it's about the, I would dare to use that word, elitism, kind of language directed into it. But I think sometimes we have to unlearn that, or in a way, sort of, what's the prestige of, because we went to colleges. We now, all of a sudden, we have this sort of, I'm better. I most of the time I feel no, it's the opposite.
So we do have to wrap up fairly
Sorry,
but because we're in slight can of worms, how do you keep a check on that in your work? Do you keep a check on it? Do you get other people to keep a check on it? You know, just on that kind of, all those elements you're talking about, that dance is in all of us, dance, you know, comes from where we're born, you know, how are we connecting? How are we really saying what we want to say?
Right.
You know, is it relevant? Is what I've written on the funding application is that actually what I'm doing? Or have I lost it in the process somewhere? And does that matter?
Right.
You know, like, because sometimes it evolves, right? But is it doing what, in the core, that's what I want to do?
Yeah, I think it constantly, like, molds and shifts and changes, especially versus like what we write on our applications to what the actual kind of product ends up being about. Because I feel like when we write our applications for our projects, it's a very kind of tick box approach of what we know we want them to hear. Whereas when we're creating, or when I'm creating, I'm not trying to tick any box so that things change and transform and shift. That's absolutely fine. In reference to what you were saying before about community and professional dance, I often feel like when I'm working in dance, like in dance context, I don't feel like I'm dancing, I feel like I'm engaging with movement in a very specific way. Whereas like when I'm in like a communal context, a party or in a community, I feel like that's when I'm dancing. So I have a very different relationship.
Interesting, that's totally different places.
Yeah, but I also feel like with, especially in teaching dance a bit more and more now, I find I'm often telling people to like, don't dance it. Because dancers like try to show like dance and try to show the movements as opposed to like being in the moment and just doing it, like doing the task, doing the action, just be it, don't like try to like show or dance it. It happens a lot with young dancers that are just like finished training or still in college. You know, and naturally because they're learning these things. But I've learned that like as you know, as I've grown as an artist, trying to drop this kind of expectation of like looking a certain way, and I think it is attached to dance being like a spectacle and anything to show rather than like just be. So yeah, I think with the two I see them quite differently, and inside of the work it kind of always shifts, but I think it's the feeling, as long as the feeling feels true and right, then that's how we know we're in the right place.
That's the check, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's the check.
Because there's no way to kind of just be like
it's difficult to predict, isn't it?
Exactly.
You can't really tell, and that's the horrible aspect. Sorry to interrupt, but I think that was really kind of clear that, you know, how these two places live, what you were saying, and how that kind of, I think, for me, I'm always trying to make sure that when it goes away from my personal space, when I'm creating work in my body that's so close, I try to remain faithful all the way through and carry all the way until, you know, the kind of however is interacting and doing this. That always, and that driven me to go away from form completely. I don't like creating work that comes from form. What I mean form is like, I know through training, dancers can deliver the most spectacular types of movement. But I think it hides dancers that of performing to the best of his ability. So dancers at its best when he's vulnerable. So I'm always questioning if my dancers are vulnerable, if they are putting themselves there, or if they're just showing how good they are in executing that technique. If I see that, no, I'm not interested, because I want you to. I want you to feel pain, but like not even sort of sadomasochistic kind of thing. I want people to be there, and feel there, just like showing that you're the hard, and you're just showing me that it's hard. They want to see it and feel it as hard.
And there's the connection.
That's the connection to
it. Yeah. When you feel it, they feel it too.
Yeah.
Even if they don't understand it, they'll feel it. They'll be it and kind of, oh wow.
Absolutely.
It's like sometimes I can see just I can just watch. I can just watch somebody just, you know, be breathless on stage for me. So it cuts my heart every time, and I know what the effect is.
And vulnerability as well. We're not usually, well, I say we're not allowed to be vulnerable.
No.
We tend not to be vulnerable.
No.
We try not to show our vulnerability. But you know, when we see it on stage, it's something very.
Dance is supposed to be all
time slowing about that. Time slows down. We see a person, we connect.
Yeah. So it's a major mission, I think. But there's a bigger conversation, I think, also that happens. But that's why I feel like it's the whole infrastructure around there also that demands us to then go to the funding, like we're going there and saying, I'm going to achieve this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to be this thing. It's like, oh, efficiency, I deliver, I'll do this, numbers, we grow with this. And I'm questioning these things now because it's things, depth and long lasting for me, always about taking time and not really about predicting. Once you kind of go to that space, and especially for dance, that's where you end up being the poorest one, because you can't predict. You can have a piece of painting and like have a prediction, wow, this is going to be, and have something that it's there and lives, communicates in many places. Dance just happens there
at that moment.
And how do we give value to that moment? And I don't think it gets the value that it really, really needs to have.
I think that's a really good place to round up for part 2 in 2 months' time. Thank you, guys, Sean and Reese. Thank you. And thanks to the gallery, and thanks to our audience that are here. And hopefully it's just the beginning of lots of different discussions around, well, all different art forms, but how we link our physical body into those art forms and collaborative methods, and to be continued.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for
Thank
you, Reese, for being here. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Oh yeah.
What's this opportunity now? It hasn't finished, has it? So if there is anything that anybody would like to ask these guys, but I don't want to put you on the spot either, because I know there's not 40 people here and you can slightly hide. That's going. So.
I was actually interested to know if you had any thoughts, because before we started the talk, you said I don't know anything about dance, and the things that we were speaking about reminded me of what it just made me think of your experience as a non-dancer, quite detached from the whole thing, and then the whole conversation was just like, what are these guys talking about?
Well, I think there's, like what you were saying about it being so kind of it's your body, and that's so much what dance is. I think I kind of grew really conscious of my body while I sat here listening to you as well. I gradually just felt my shoulders, and then it's dropped my shoulders slightly and kind of slightly changed how I was sitting, and I think that awareness is really interesting. I think that's probably what I get from watching dance, and I think definitely what you were saying about during the pandemic, that kind of accessibility of dance through things like social media. I did probably watch more dance than I ever have before just during that time, because it kind of being on the screen, but also because people, I think there's something different watching a solo dancer to watching sort of a group. And that kind of like you said, the vulnerability and that kind of intimacy of watching someone dance. I watched a lot of things which were about movement, so it was kind of saying about we're all in this weird situation, let's just move. So there was one dancer I was kind of following on Instagram, and she would just do a weekly movement session, and because you were watching her, but your camera was on, but it was a live thing, so you were just following it, and you knew other people were doing it as well, but there's that kind of idea of I think with me dancing, I become really self-conscious that dancing alone in the kitchen is something completely different, and that's something which is really accessible, and I think everyone does it, whether or not they kind of tell people that they do that. I think everyone dances by themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of thing. So I think
they do, right? Everyone does it, right?
Of course.
Just
I think so too.
So I think that's kind of a really nice thing. Is I think it is as much as there's the whole training into dance as well. What we all start with is that body and that awareness of the body, and you can kind of. I think that's what I appreciate when watching dance, is kind of what people are doing with their body and work. And I think I like that idea of watching someone and you're just watching someone's heart racing as they're trying to do with dancing and that sort of thing. So,
Charlie Morrissey, another artist, also did open sessions during lockdown from 9 till 10 every day, and he did exactly that. He just tuned in. It was just really nice. People came on screen. Some people had coffees. Some people just eating their toast. So some people didn't dance at all. They just watched, or he put a playlist together every morning, and it's all really different and eclectic, and it was just really nice for an hour just to go and put that time aside for me, whether I'm dancing or just doing some body conditioning or listening or having breakfast, whatever there wasn't an expectation. And I think dance still does suffer from the expectation of what we should be as dancers, because I remember that from my training and performing. I must be there half an hour early before class starts. I must, and if I didn't do those things, it would always put a curse or whatever, and actually,
And so does
needs to
the
mature a bit.
audience also as well. So that's what's nice what you're saying. It's like, I can actually connect. Like if I start thinking just in that format, I don't really need to know everything about it. If I can just actually just understand from the kind of bodily element aspect of it, like the really kind of basic functions of it, is that it's enough for you to understand that. I think we as dancers tend to think like because we possess this sort of understanding. We should always think in that space, and we forget how actually no. We can just breathe. We can just most of the time these days when I go to the studio, I try to see for how long I don't move. It's really hard. And then what do I actually really want to do? I really try to
checking in.
I try to not kind of just fulfill what I already know I can do. So I try not to move. It's extremely hard. You're always just so hyper-aware. It's impossible anyway. I think my brain is moving all the time. Anyway. It's like I can see I look at my breathing and the blood, I know everything's moving all the time. And I try to stay quiet.
Because it's also interesting thinking about that kind of concept of it's just movement, space, breath. And there's that awful thing, isn't it, the ageing of the dancer, the ageing of the body and its capabilities. And does that open up new possibilities for extending? Because if it's, where it's not about the perfection of the movement, the perfection of the body, it's about the emotion. And that emotion can change and mature as the body matures as well. And that's something which is not really kind of happening yet, properly, a little bit, but not fully.
I always remember going to see on that.
That's great.
It is, and I love that movement, space, breath thing. I remember going to see Claude Ensemble, and I think I may have mentioned it before, but this performer came out. He was probably in his mid-60s, so experienced just in life, and he came out and he just, all he did was stand, and we had no idea what he was thinking, but he embodied that. And everybody was just transfixed. And I say he did nothing, of course he was doing something, but this body of life came on stage, and it was so refreshing to see older performers who really knew themselves. And we do have a culture where, because dance is so, or can be, so it can take every element of your life. You can do it all day, right? You get parts of it. From the moment you wake up to when you go to sleep, but actually, and then as you age, you haven't got time to do that because you've got other things that become. But how do we keep those dancers engaged? I'm experiencing it. I'm like, we're not going to go to that class because it's going to be like a million technique exercises, and I want to do it, but I'm going to feel an idiot. And I've got over 20 years of professional experience, so it's kind of.
It's quite interesting as well because as you age, your body's changing and developing and molding into something else, not different to what it was. I'm going to be African, maybe now. I think it's interesting this counter of internally or becoming more seasoned and having so much more life experience so that you can just go on the stage and just stand there and people will just be so wowed of what you're giving from the inside. Whereas at the same time, your body's in the climb, so there's this real interesting counter happening, which is kind of balance. It's quite beautiful, I think.
And it's the dance industry recognising and how to utilise those skills.
Absolutely. And
I don't think we've caught up.
There's a big question, definitely, in that sense of opening up the potentiality of dance being much more than just an amazing motions that one can deliver. And there is that ability, which I think is where we should be heading towards. Because I think in dance, a bit like dance, man, it's like we have a short kind of career time all of a sudden. And people sometimes when you're dancing past beyond the point, they always go, you still dancing? Like, what do you mean? As if it's like it's such a, you know, I keep thinking like, why does not people feel that? I mean, I'm sure we all go to parties at a really, really late age, and all of a sudden pursuing dancing as a sort of a profession at the age of past 60, it's like, how? Do you still dance, or do you? It's all that that sort of expectation that movement has to be always in one way.
But we put that on ourselves
as well. But I think also we created that expectation. Therefore, for me, dance as an art form isn't about that. If that makes sense.
Totally, yeah.
Dance as an art form isn't about technique, delivery, but it's the art of the body. I think it opens up the surface. I feel more comfortable doing certain things in a gallery space than going to the theatre and just standing there for a while. Because people just go like, he's not dancing, he's not moving. And I've done this like at Sadler's Wells the other day, and I took a friend of mine who's not a dancer, but comes from film, and this beautiful set was a French choreographer. I mean, the Europeans go like really kind of high brown art, and at Sadler's Wells. So it was just a beautiful set, but these dancers were just like standing there. I thought it was beautiful. There was a lot of movement, not from the dancers, but like everything else around them was like, wow, it's cinematic. I was like, oh my god, it was like watching a movie, but like actually with a dance performance. I was like, this is great. It was smoke everywhere, lights, it was everything. It was a forest. It was a massive forest. But a lot of people that went there to see dance, they're like, this is not a dance. Like, there you have it. It's like, they can't watch in that way. So that expectation is crazy.
It's really interested in what you were talking about in terms of process and just reflecting what the start point with the pandemic and that pause that it gave for people to kind of reflect on process and what you were saying about the spectacle and the process being such an important part about leading towards something and not being valued in that kind of that way as well. So sort of interesting. I remember seeing, through the pandemic, artists kind of showing process far more and that involvement and stepping away from that conclusion and that idea of perfection, whereas actually that journey is often the most important thing. And in the digital age, maybe that is something that we're far more party to. Where I'm really interested in thinking about what you were saying about dance in perspective within other art forms, and just that ephemerality of it and the moment of experience. That conclusion is experienced within the moment, whereas something with a painting, you see that conclusion, but really what's most interesting is how has something really reached that conclusion. So
absolutely, it's not giving enough space for it.
No.
So how you get to the place you are, rather than, and after, for me, the best part.
The pause in time was it just sounded really unusual. I mean, I think, I say particularly for dance, it probably isn't, but because we've got that whole balance between training and keeping fit, but also creating or thinking or dreaming up, and then there's the other bit where you actually start. So it's to be able to pause and give yourself more time. We just never really, I think in the UK, we never really allowed it. Because what is it?
We have to take it.
Yeah, we have to take it because we sort of have to prove that it's needed to create better work and also to, to do the let's create stuff that is needed from us, you know, funding and everything. It needs more time to see it.
Here, the process is great. I mean, again, there's something about, and I really like this idea of what you were mentioning, that how the time that the pandemic allowed audiences are able to actually experience how artists actually think, how they actually come up with things that they want to come up with. And it's so varied, the process of actually starting and creating something. And I'm going through the moment right now that I don't want to see myself different from a visual artist to a composer, because I think we have different processes, but the creative universe, I think it's the same, you know. But everybody has that capability, by the way. I also don't see it. This belonging just to artists. People have that. Whether they practice that, if different artists do practice, so they nurture that all the time. Every human has a kind of that universe of creativity. But it's putting that process to be witness, which is something I'm doing on some of my projects now, so I could simply just open it up and just not being judged. We put in this in ourselves. We're very judgmental. Nobody can see the mistakes I'm making. Actually, the mistakes are the best elements of what you're doing.
But again, it's that vulnerable place, isn't it? It's like, it's literally like being in the studio naked. You have like somebody coming, because you're still working it out, and there's that thing where you want to sort of do that privately. But is that because of tradition? You know,
I think it's tradition. I think for me, I really like I guess not feeling precious about the process. Like I think I'm just process driven in general. So I'm not so focused. I feel like a good process will make a good show outcome, whatever. So I feel like the more people that are involved, like I really like to have this open door policy, so that anyone feels like they can just come in and like sit, observe, say something, maybe not. But I feel like it feeds me in the process, and also it brings more conversation around. Because we're preparing for this show that people are going to see. So if we're like holding it until the very end, then you don't really get the real responses until that moment. So if you invite in, for me anyway, I feel like inviting it in earlier allows us to know what it's, or to question like, is what we're trying to put out there being received in the way that we think it is, or is it not? And I think all those questions inform my practice so much more than if I was to like hold on to it and give it out. So far anyway, I feel like maybe at some point in my life I will just create and just like blah. But I find that it's still, because I'm still growing, it's always growing, it's still feeding me to have that response, so that the art is a conversation and not just an end product or like a fixed thing in time and space. It's always kind of moving and changing,
morphing.
Exactly.
You want it to be the same at the beginning and
and you want it to allow you to show you what it is as well, rather than like setting an expectation for yourself of like what you want your work to be. You can allow it to like teach you what it is, and allow yourself to respond to your own work or like learn from it. I feel like that's also quite refreshing. Rather than like trying to meet the standard that you set for yourself. We all have anyway, but it's nice to blur the lines or the edges a little bit, I think.
I think the importance of failure sometimes gets forgotten.
The what? Importance,
The importance of failure. A lot of the times, like, you're just always showing how perfect you are. I always find that the impression of always like, we have to show that we actually can get it right all the time. Like, the failure is actually an incredibly powerful element of being real.
This isn't a comment to reflect on failure, but there was just like the moment in the the performance you did in the Sky Room, the kind of sharing. There was just that magical moment where you kind of asked one of the dancers to start introducing breath, and it wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't part of the original piece. And it was in the moment, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and that was just so powerful, that bit, because it really was, because the performance was amazing anyway, because it was just that kind of like, it was a moment where, oh my God, people can touch and they can be, it was visceral and it was very kind of physical. And then when the breath, it kind of calmed down, it was almost like this explosion of kind of like, wow, are we through this moment now? And then when you just got everyone to breathe, it was just very magical, that moment, and that happened in that space, in that time, at that point.
Yeah. And also, like, this could go wrong as well.
Yeah, you were kind of like, oh,
yeah.
Did you like it? Did it work?
I was like, what? It's like, oh my.
Too much breath.
And like, so they just went for it.
Yeah.
So like everybody just. And
that must have been quite difficult for the dancers as well, just to have that trust in you to kind of go, okay, I'm going to go with this.
Exactly. So it's a joint thing. So
yeah.
But yeah, allowance for failure. I think it's things that can go wrong or not, or can be amazing.
Yeah.
So you don't put yourself in that risk. It's just reverse to that element.
But I think you find as well, like, often something will happen within a dance, or something doesn't go quite right, or doesn't work, and the audience very rarely is actually going to notice that. I think dancers are very good at then kind of like that, like intuitive, like just carry on.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting. We had an art commission in here, sort of like so it was a film piece, and the two dancers kind of performing in front of it. And I think it was only because I was pressing play on the music that I watched the performance about 6 times, as well as the rehearsal aspect of it. And every time there was a bit where they kind of like had a choreographed dance, and then it kind of had a section where they just kind of freestyled. And every time I watched it, the kind of performer said to me afterwards, she was like, oh, like, you must be so bored of this. I was like, I have not watched you do the same performance.
It's amazing,
every time, and I think that was just like, it was really interesting. Every time I watched it was different, and by the end of it, I still was like completely just like pulled in. It's quite nice. And you don't often get to do that. You go to the performance, you watch dance once. Kind of, you don't appreciate normally as an audience member, like how it develops.
I think it's interesting when like mistakes happen, because quite often it can be it can be your worst nightmare. You're like, but then after, like once you're through it, and the things how you respond to that, it can make the show so much better.
Yeah, absolutely.
You go, oh, that's great when that happens.
Yeah, I saw Curious Orange, like one of the first performances up in the Festival Theatre in Edinburgh. I have no idea if Michael Slick-Clark's wig was meant to fall off at the beginning of the performance, when he was doing a bow gesture dressed as the king with a great big kind of like long wig, and it came off, and then he just picked it up and then he danced with it for the rest of the scene, and I've got no idea if that was meant to happen or not.
Yeah.
But it was just a brilliant moment, and it stuck in my head for like 20 whatever years.
Yeah, it's keeping it alive as well.
Yeah.
And again,
Keeps it alive.
human.
Keeps it human.
Keeps you on your toes.
It's like, and it's a reason why I decided to always move into no form. Because I want that. I want to not be right.
Yeah.
And then get it right. And then this is a practice. It's not like, and I say improvisation not in the way that whatever, but it's rehearsed. Improvisation is a highly hypersensitive work. And it's like, and I love the way when people are like, is everything improvised that you did? I just go like, how do I answer this question after they do that? I'm like, well, let me tell you a story. It took just 2 months to get that improvisation there. So
it's massively
really
skilled.
It's super skilled.
Yeah.
This is very vulnerable. It's like, you're not pretending.
And you have to be true.
True.
Because if you plan it, then it
doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's responsive. So you're really there.
I was interested because you talk about there's a real difference between the audience, being an audience member and being a performer. There's kind of 2 mindsets there. And when you talk about kind of the process, And when we put something on stage, usually it is supposed to be perfect, and that's what the audience expect. So is that where the divide, do you think, has kind of happened over time, because the audience expects what, like the perfection, and the artist wants to put that on the stage, so then there's kind of a divide, because then the audience can never feel what the artist feels. Does that make sense?
I think there's also like a lot of shows that are kind of packaged and sold, and like it's like a machine.
Yeah.
So audiences are used to seeing things that are like spoon-fed to them and pretty imperfect. And then for like the other side, where it's a bit more raw and like maybe more polished, we're fine with seeing something like that. And I think it's also the type of shows that the general public is seeing and what they're used to versus something slightly different that they haven't encountered before, if that makes sense. So I think it's also about what they're taking in as a society, as a culture on a regular basis, and how that affects what they see when they come to see shows that aren't like that, and how engaged or not they are, because it's not like handed to them. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so the package versus I don't know what I'm going to see tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, it's risk.
And how people consume, right?
Yeah.
How they because it becomes about consumption, I think.
Yeah.
And that's the problem for me when dance becomes a consumption, because it's just it can't be bought. And once you package that way, then you're only going to end up with this same level of expectation, the same level of delivery. It doesn't shift. It doesn't give you that.
And I think it's interesting what you were saying about language, because it's almost very much about language. Is anybody, a gallery space should be available for everybody to access and find a representation and a connection. But people bring a language that they have learned through their lives about the way that they read and understand something.
Yeah.
And the way that people will judge a successful painting is based on what they can understand as their language based around that understanding, whether it's a skill set that they can identify with through form of representation. And with dance, about an extreme of physicality and a spectacle that they can understand in that kind of an athleticism. Whereas it's really interesting hearing you talk about the process of training and learning a skill and a craft, so that you can then reflect on it and undo it and see the constraints that it gives you, so that you can explore the freedoms that you can find within it. It's very interesting. It's how you bring people along with that, because I think people want to understand. And I think we want people to question, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. It shouldn't be just like, oh, this is what we're going to see.
Yeah.
I don't think artists do what it needs to be doing. I have a big post-pandemic. I'm all over the place, asking questions about everything, and including that divide that you're talking about. I don't want my audience to feel divided with me. Hence why I chose Within the Round and Dance in theatre. No, it's like, and even understanding it, I also don't feel like I'm just kind of trying to place a language around it that just say they cannot connect with. And yes, it's all about how we describe things. It's about trying to question this: how do we come to know what we know? And we all the time think, at the moment we're forced all the time to just, I need to get the best mark so I can get the best job. For me, this is a problem. It's a massive problem, because we're not.
It's around the feeling of learning, isn't it?
No.
Feeling of learning and inquisitiveness and curiosity. Surely, far greater. That would get you the good results anyway.
Yeah.
But we're sort of.
We don't learn.
Our mindsets are different. Yeah.
And it's not about experiencing things anymore. So I feel like answering the question, I think it's both. It's expectation and what we have been trained, forced to deliver. And it's as a constraint, and it's a huge pressure. When I make my propositions, it's a nightmare. Because I feel one way, and I have to say something else, and the audience ends up with something else. Because when it happens on a day, a mistake can happen, something can happen, like, you kind of have to be right. You just have to be in stress mode all the time. So nothing's going to go exactly how you've actually done it. And instead, if you embrace that, I think, for me, this work special very much about whoever wants to turn up, whenever wants to turn up, however we do. And thank you so much for the questions. We've really kind of it's like, it's so nice to hear that, how you're experiencing it as well, because it's you just make us think, right? For me, just
and it really offers that moment of pause, like you kind of intended to have for me as well, but for everyone on the outside and inside, to just stop where we're at and just cross lines for a second and go back out into the world again. Just with those things, to think about.
Yeah, bubbling away.
Yeah, exactly. Even if they feel like they aren't answered.
Yeah.
It's just things.
They'll pop up in your process
Exactly.
at certain points.
Yeah.
because we all are creating right now.
Yeah.
You want to say what are you doing next?
We've got we've got a dance day at the Rose, which is involving 24 groups, all related around the theme of spring. So that's on the 29th and 30th of April. It's a free event, and it's open to schools and dance groups and individuals, and so it's literally just down through the underpass. It's a beautiful space that Sean also worked in. And then we've got Hopper Schechter coming to the venue with his new show Contemporary Dance 2.0, but it's all about rave culture, and the music's going to be very loud because we have to buy 350 earplugs to give to the audience just in case. Just a massive box of earplugs. And then we've got Map Dance also coming, which is Chichester University 4th year master's degree course, and they get to do a tour. But what's nice about that work is you get 4 completely different experiences of work, which is why we bring them to Milton Keynes, because we're still introducing lots of different types of work, and so that's kind of what we're up to. We're running our youth dance company as well. We work with lots of different practitioners, so it's a slow kind of grind after lockdown. Transferring again from the online to the live, and some places are open, some places still aren't, or are hesitant, and audiences sometimes hesitant. So it's just trying to embrace that engagement we had over lockdown into the real world again.
That's why slow down is necessary.
Yeah.
We're not going to go like that.
No.
I mean, I'm noticing much more selective now. Is to go more to see things that I want. I'm going less now than it was before. I don't know why. So why go? I really select what I want to go.
And choices.
I go and I really want to go and see this. It's only when I really want to get out of the house now, because I think we became averse to risk. So I'm trying to change that.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know what happened in the lockdown. It's just a brainwashing. I feel brainwashed through lockdown. What you doing next, Chris?
Hey, Ruth, what are you doing next?
What you doing, Ruth? Who are you? What are you not doing? It's more like...
No, we're doing a preview of our new work called Black Is at the V&A Museum this week and next week. So it's this week, Saturday, this performance at 12 and 2 p.m. and it's also free as well.
Cool.
And then we're doing the V&A Lates, will be the same 25-minute excerpt of our work next week, Saturday, for V&A Lates. And yeah, this work was really kind of in process. Like we just came off the back of an 8-week R&D, just like going through the themes of what Black means to us as individuals, and it's an ensemble work. It's our company's first ensemble work, and yeah, I'm very excited to share it in this context, which doesn't feel like a stage. We've done the kind of premiere of it at Sadler's Wells for Wildcard in February. And yeah, we've just been kind of researching, and we're going to go back into the process after all of this, you know, these sharings to create a full-length work, which will be, I feel like, minimum an hour now, because we have so much more material than we thought we would have created. So yeah, that's what we're working on now, so feel free to come through.
And you go to Brazil.
Yeah, and I'm going to Brazil as well. I got the Develop Your Creative Practice Fund, so I'm going to go to Brazil to try and develop more of an international practice that I can start. I feel like I'm in a bit of a bubble, like I'm working as an artist and it's all very consistent, but I feel like I'm in a UK bubble of work, which feels a bit like a cycle, and I try to always kind of break out of cycles and patterns and loops. So I've had experience in Brazil before, because I was there for like an exchange program. I went to uni for 6 months. So in doing the YCP, I thought that I could kind of go back there and create more of a connection. I'm like a developed artist outside of school, and also John has connections and is from there as well. So yeah, I'll be doing some research there in October, and I'll be there for around 3 months, just kind of, yeah, researching and developing my practice and taking time outside of this, you know, this context that I'm working in that can just feel like it's a constant, and to give myself a kind of breath of fresh air and like a new environment, and also just some sun as well. So, so yeah, trying to get more. But yeah, so that's what's happening right now.
Thanks so much, guys, and thank you to the gallery again, and thanks to you guys for coming. And yeah, hope we see you soon.
Wonderful, amazing. This is really cool. This has been great.
Oh, thank you guys.
I think we should have done it.